Hello, beautiful lights, and welcome to another episode of From a Medium's Perspective. It's been a dark and stormy afternoon here in Roanoke, but happily the rain has gone and we are looking forward to a great show. Today, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit more about mediumship. And then I'm going to be sharing a tale from the other side about a disappearing cat. And then I'll be sharing an exercise that you can use in order to develop your psychic abilities. Well, we talked about mediumship last time, and so this is kind of like part 2 of the series. Next time, we're going to be talking about channeling, which is sort of another level of mediumship. I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention just a little bit more about ethics. The reason that you want the gift matters. Do you want to be good at sensing spirits and developing your intuition so that you can have power or control over other people? Or are you looking at it from an attitude of service and a discipline of self and increasing your abilities and your joy? And it does make a difference. Allan Kardec wrote a book, that's Kardec, back in the late 1800s, called The Medium's Book. And he said that mediumship done right is the pursuit of knowledge and the practice of kindness. And I really liked that because we are transforming the world with our actions, each of us, day by day. In fact, the Buddha said, the dedication of a virtuous act for all beings is like adding a drop of water to the ocean. As long as the ocean exists, the drop of water exists. So, too, a small positive action, when directed toward the benefit of all beings, will endure forever. He also takes the stance that creating things, and we're going to be talking a little bit about physical mediumship today, or manifestation in the physical realm through mediumship. He says that manifestation without theory is weak. With theory, you can yield the moral fruit of wisdom and kindness. Just love that those virtues are attached to the practice of mediumship. It says so in the Bible as well. Desire the best gifts. And of course, the highest gift is love. It's important as a medium that you operate under a particular ethical guideline if you're going to be considered reliable. You don't want your clients or people that rely on your judgment to feel like they've been tricked. You can ask yourself, are you delivering your messages in a truly loving way, in a way that empowers other people? Are you providing them positive or uplifting help and information that encourages them to be better human beings? Do your readings leave them feeling more peaceful and calm with a sense of security in their inner knowingness of their spiritual indestructibility? These things are all important. And I usually end my show with a quote that says, without integrity, you have nothing. That comes from my dad. He instilled that in me. His name was Dr. Patton Lockwood, a teacher, professor at Longwood College. And he really changed my life when he told me that one day, back when I was a teenager. Without integrity, you have nothing. Maybe it was the way he said it. Maybe it was a message from Spirit for me. The Bible says, follow the way of love and eagerly desire the gifts of the Spirit, especially prophecy. So we shouldn't be afraid of projecting in time. Some people think that only the past and the present are written, but there are things that are written in the future, and it's very important to discern what is written and what absolutely will happen versus possibilities that could be altered by someone's will or decision-making process. We talk about the discerning of spirits, which is a biblical phrase for being able to sense and classify and identify spirits. And we talk about tongues and interpretation, which are old terms for channeling, tongues being in the indigenous language of the speaker in spirit, interpretation being in the native language of the hearer in spirit. I've always thought it would be really cool if I could develop my mediumship enough that I could channel in someone's native tongue. Haven't reached that point yet, but I certainly think it would be pretty cool to be able to give them their messages in their natural language instead of always falling back on English if that were not their first language. So why would you really care whether you talk to spirits? Like, what's the big deal about that? In the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was sort of a big push bringing Eastern religion or religious thought or philosophy to the West. Madame Blavatsky brought a lot of information and philosophy this way. One of the biggest things that was attempted through spiritualism and the spiritualist movement was sort of the proof of continuance of life. Proof that life and our individuality does continue past the physical world and after death. And of course, there is no death. But it's more than that too, because when we talk to or connect with people that have passed over to the other side and had a chance to look back on life, they carry with them a higher perspective. And of course, there are also guides and angels and higher beings that can also help us. And that brings us encouragement and promises of good things that are going to come, an assurance that we aren't alone, and an understanding from a higher perspective. And it really adds wonder and beauty and grace to our life. And that's why I chose to do this program from a medium's perspective, because I just wanted to share some of the amazing things that I've learned in giving readings and in talking with spirit and in my meditations and in my communication with my guides. I just find it particularly interesting and thought perhaps you might as well. Before I delve into specifics, I wanted to give you some background information about the systems that function behind the communication with spirit world. The first one is a concept that we have two wills. When we're not in our body, our will can actually never be violated. And that's a pretty awesome thing. You would think, well, then why on earth would we bother to come down here where our material will is stomped on every day? There is a reason that we come into the physical expression or the physical dimension, and that's because it's the only place where we can experience separateness and work on some aspects of our character that might not be so easy to address in the other realm. And also, this is the realm of miracles. This is the only place where a thought can actually become a thing. So it's pretty cool. We have our higher will, or our etheric will, as I call it, and then we have our material will, which is our will attached to the physical body and our experience here on earth. One of the things that really impresses me every time I connect with a spirit that has crossed over is the volume and intensity of love that surrounds each person. It's really love without end. A spirit's ability to experience that has to do with whether or not they're aware of it. And you might think, well, they've already crossed over. They must be aware that it's there. The only thing that really changes when we pass over is that we don't have a physical body. Our mind and our perception remain the same. Our emotions are the same. It doesn't mean that we're frozen in that state. It's just that we really haven't changed that much when we cross over. Each individual's experience of crossing over is very specific to that person. It's just not exactly what we might think, but why wouldn't someone experience love and feel that connection to that divine love that is everything and in everything and through everything? And I guess you could answer the question about, do you feel love every day right here? Because if God or the divine, the source of all that is, we being the pieces of that, expressing ourselves, however you want to view your spirituality and your existence on the planet, if we are parts of that and that love is unending, present everywhere, then in actuality, we are no closer to God on the other side than we are right now in our physical bodies. because it's love that's embedded in every cell and the matrix of all that is. Spirits that cross over might be very obsessed about feeling bad about themselves, or focused with a particular hatred on something, or just frankly oblivious that there's been a change. They may remain that way for a while. It's sort of the same here. We're very specific about the type of love that we expect. We want it to come from a certain person. We want to have it now. We want to have it served to us the way that we want it. And we tend to not realize that it's actually everywhere around us. And I'll be talking in depth about eternal love and material love, limited and unlimited, in another show. I just thought that that was interesting, that spirits do not always connect with love. And there's a triangle that we're comprised of. We hear a lot about body, mind, spirit, but what I've discovered is it's more that we have our physical expression, our body, and our spiritual expression, which is our mind, our perception, our understanding. Then there's an activating force to us, which is our will, and that's the creative part of us. So we're really body, mind, and will, or physical, spirit, and creative. And we are all those things at all times, just depending on how far we press ourselves out into the material world and become physical. I wanted to talk a little bit about our life purpose versus a life contract, just briefly. I think we've talked in another show about our life contract. It's essentially the time that we've come in to be here on earth, and that is guarded and protected by our guardian angels. We have certain rights and protections that come with that, and our life here on earth has a purpose. We have a soul purpose, a reason for coming into the physical world. And again, that's different for everyone, just as different as our experience in transitioning to the other side. It's just as different coming over here into the physical world for whatever reasons we might do that for. There are basic types of protection. We went into a great depth in another episode on psychic protection. If you'd be interested, you can check that out. Basically, we have a life contract, which is protecting us in our life contract, keeping us in the time frame that we're supposed to be here, and that's our guardian angels. And then we have personal protection, which are those things that we do with ourselves, like meditation, visualization, affirmation, using crystals or sage or talismans, anything that focuses our will and imbues the air or the objects around us with a particular intent. We kind of add our intent to the physical world around us. The third type, of course, is our guides and angels, and you have to ask them for their help. Another thing is our chakras that comprise the interface with the spirit realm. They're actually vibrational centers that are conduit or our connection between us, our physical self, and our non-physical self, our spiritual self, and our body self. We've talked about both chakras and auras in other episodes, so I won't go into great detail on that. But I do want to talk a little bit about the general categories of guides. I do have an episode planned to talk in detail about them. I'm just going to run through them for today's show because we have a lot of things to talk about. The inner band of guides are basically 5 categories. That's not the only categories of entities and energies that work with us. I want to remind you that a spirit is somebody who has crossed over that you might have known or might have lived at another time. A person is a person. A spirit is a spirit. And they are not guides or protectors in a technical sense because they are spirits. Guides are guides, and angels are yet another classification. And we'll be looking at that another time. But the basic 5 are child guide, sometimes known as a joy guide or gatekeeper. I call mine, whose name is Primrose, my spirit daughter. They could be called your spirit son or spirit daughter. And their energy is really light. Their voice is your intuition. and they are very close to you. Who knows that they weren't your imaginary friend in childhood, or at least one of them, unless you were talking to spirits too, like me. We have protectors. Those are generally indigenous people from different countries and often Native Americans, which is interesting to find people in Europe. When I was at Arthur Findlay College of Psychic Science that had Native American protector guides, even though they lived in England and had never been to the United States. So there must be some good mojo there. I have an indigenous Papua New Guinean protector, among others. We have a master teacher, and they are the ones that are kind of responsible for the life course that we're in, and they oversee many lifetimes, our past lives. They've been there. Actually, I have two. We have healers or chemists, and they're the ones that adjust our energy two ways. One, so that we can function better in spirit. So they're there to help us adapt. And also our chemist will also help us, or our healer guide will help us open the channels and function well when offering those kind of services to other people. We have a philosopher guide who's just basically a sage. They're often referred to as Dr. So-and-so. I have a Dr. Linder and a Dr. Pedersen. And then we have the other categories, which are totems, elementals, mythicals, angels, gods and goddesses, starseed, ascended masters, divas, etc. Communication in the physical world, they say, is 7% words. And the rest is gestures, mannerisms, speech patterns, innuendo, tone of voice, etc. And I find that really interesting because I think it's about the same in the spirit world. Must be right about 7%. Spirit does use those other ways of communication, gestures, mannerisms, speech patterns, etc., to communicate in the way that they speak. And that's our clairaudience, and that comes into our empathic nature, being able to pick up those nuances. Also, they give us symbols. The next layer of information is symbols, and they might use sort of a form of charades. There are also apports and visual appearances where they show up, and those are clairvoyant things. When we see symbols or spirits, that's clairvoyance. When we speak the language of the spirit realm, words being the language of the physical realm, emotions being the language of the spirit realm, that's when our empathy, our empathic ability really kicks in. Before you work, you should always ground yourself. There's a reason for that, to connect with the earth so that there's balance. Because if you're all up high, you're vulnerable to energies that might not be so positive. So you want to be grounded as well as extended into the high realm. And the reason that we ground is to center ourselves, to drop off all the cares and worries of the day, to connect ourselves with our physical identity, which seems unusual with a spiritual endeavor, but is very necessary. It's the place where we drop off our ego and our intellect. We hear a lot about ego being a big problem for people, but it's also our minds, it's our intellect, because we do have preconceived ideas. So before we work in spirit, we have to drop our ego and our intellect. It doesn't mean that we can't perceive or that we're not intelligent. It just means that we drop off our preconceptions. There's a rule when you're giving your mediumship, like when you're giving a message from something, and that is give what you get, no more, no less. And you use what you know, but you deepen it by honing your focus. Energy follows focus. You just have to let it be as it is. It is what it is. You should deliver those messages that you get in love. Sometimes they aren't easy messages. Sometimes you might have something that triggers a fear for you, but you need to be very careful not to translate a message that has any kind of fear embedded in it, and just deliver it in love. There's kind of a spectrum that intuition and mediumship and psychic ability flow along. And it begins at the level of instinct. One side, it's all us, and that's our instinct, that's our physicality, it's our survival, our food, clothing, shelter, sex, warmth, coolness, the basics. But almost immediately it transitions into intuition as we move along the spectrum toward the influence of higher minds, either ours or those that are of higher vibration. And that first piece after instinct is intuition. It's the word of knowledge. We just know. Then it grades into psychic ability, which is known as the word of wisdom. And we ask ourselves, how did I know that? I sounded pretty smart. And you were, because you had a word of wisdom flow through you. Then it flows on along that continuum to mediumship, which is the discerning of spirits. And that's classifying, categorizing, identifying, describing, etc. And channeling begins. Trance healing occurs at that point, where someone can step back out of their body and just allow that divine force. And for all you healers out there in energy medicine, Donna Eden, the Brennan system, Reiki, you know exactly what I'm talking about. How do we collect our information? It just happens in a tremendously deep collection of ways, so many ways. We feel, we see, we know, we sense. Referring to another episode, because this is a series, you could refer to the episode on clairvoyance for some of the specific details about those gifts. Another general thing that I think it's important to know is, why do sometimes we experience connections with spirit when we're in the dream state? That's because the connection's easier. Our left brain is at rest. It's easier to accept the information. When you're meditating or doing light altered state work or headed toward deep trance, you try to hit and maintain that place in your mind that feels like right between sleep and wake, where daydreaming occurs. You can trust the information that you get there and really develop your ability to stay in theta, Theta, Old Greek word theta. That's a light altered state. And then you can deepen it even more into a deep trance or a dead trance. And that's where physical mediumship starts to kick in. Casey, when he was channeling his remedies and diagnosis for people, was in a dead trance. He was called the Sleeping Prophet. Hoyt Robinette is one of the premier card precipitation experts. Card precipitation is when spirit puts a picture and an image on something, in this case cards, index cards, and on the back are the names of your guides and angels. And it isn't through his hand as a medium, it's through precipitation. That's what it's called, the appearance of that. And so deep trance or dead trance is where things that we would call miracles happen. When you are studying and developing your work, it's really important to create a space that you can work in, and it's really nice to have some music behind you. I think a tone like the Ultimate Om, that's a CD available online. Sacred Drums, A Shamanic Journey is another one I like. I don't sell these. These are just available. There's some good things on YouTube. Having that non-interference, nothing subliminal, nothing guided, not hemi-synced or any of those things. So you're not artificially altered and go into a pure state. That's really important. We are really rushing through our time, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about physical mediumship. There's mental mediumship and physical mediumship. I wanted to teach you a little bit about the types of expressions of that kind of thing there. If you wanted to, you can kind of Google on the internet and look in physical mediumship or physical manifestation of spirit, and you'll find all kinds of cool pictures. A lot of them are from the 1800s or early 1900s. It does not mean that that only happened then. Of course, it still happens now. It's a very rare occurrence, and the groups of people that are trained to the level of developing their mediumship to a physical level are very private about that. can be kind of risky to the medium to be in a public setting for demonstrating that type of mediumship, because a physical medium is basically someone who can manipulate physical systems, and it pulls on the energy of that person. And they consider there's like a vital magnetic energy that is particular. Some people have an easier time allowing that to happen through their bodies. You can look up ectoplasm or teleplasm. That's the form that spirit pulls from the medium. Ectoplasm has been demonstrated in a spirit passing through the body of the medium, usually along some kind of cord that looks almost like an umbilical cord, physically appearing in front of the people that are sitting with that medium. That's usually done in red light or in dark. There's some very developed mediums over in England that are using teleplasm expression of spirit, and they're able to sit and have basically a holographic form of spirit that everybody that's there sitting in the circle can see. All the people that are non-mediums can see. It looks kind of greenish or blue when you see that. You might think, whoa, that is so freaky. But if you think about the fact that we pass from dimension to dimension all the time through birth and death and through sleep and other things, it's really not that strange. But I mentioned that it could be risky to the medium. That's because as the medium goes into a deep, or what they call dead trance, they're not dead, they're just sleeping. They are able to disconnect their rational left brain and just allow spirit to move through them as a portal or conduit. If that projection of spirit through their body were to be touched without the permission or awareness or preparation of the medium, it has been recorded to have actually killed the medium, because what happens is someone reaches out because they just want to see if what they're looking at is real. They try to touch it. The ectoplasmic cord that attaches to the medium can snap back. And there were some studies that have been done where a medium in trance is manifesting a spirit, and the spirits have weighed up to 50 pounds on a scale. The mediums lost around 30. I don't know how the other 20 came. Not quite sure. Maybe from other things that we don't completely understand. But it's a pretty amazing thing to have happen. Even in channeling, where someone is stepping out of the way enough to allow the messages of someone else, particularly a higher being or ascended master. I've heard Jesus and Kuan Yin and Saint Germain and many other people and higher energies channeled. The first time that I sat in a channeling circle with another developed medium, before I began to develop my mediumship to the point that it is right now, I really felt this pull on my solar plexus as they were giving messages. And at one point I thought, oh my God, I think I'm just going to throw up right here, because the intensity of the pull on the solar plexus, the chakra, was so strong. It was very uncomfortable, and I don't travel very well. I have to take Eclazine or something to get by. And I thought, oh my goodness, please let this stop. It did stop, because as we acclimate to transitioning back and forth between dimensions and raising our vibration to become better mediums, that adjustment is not as uncomfortable. It's very often people will experience a headache or something like that. That has to do with not closing their energies back properly or not acclimating their energies. And you can ask your guides and angels to help with that. If you have had a really deep session where you're in a deep altered state, you're really making some headway there, you want to really be sure that you ground yourself afterwards. Get some water, go eat something, stomp your feet, wake yourself back up and come back in your body. Close your energies back. You don't want to leave them just hanging out there. It could drain you, and it's not very cool. Anyway, I wanted to talk to you about the two basic types of mediumship in more detail. One is mental mediumship, and those are the things that we've been talking about. They're telepathic type skills. Mental mediumship is telepathic. Physical mediumship is telekinetic. We've been talking about some of the forms of mental mediumship in some of our other shows. We talked about clairvoyance, which is clear seeing, and that could be involving a medical medium. It can involve remote viewing, astro travel, shamanic journeying. Another form of mental mediumship that's just starting to cross the line over to physical is transfiguration. And that's when the faces of past lives or the spirits that are being channeled or your guides and angels begin to transfigure, because spirit will use pretty much anything to communicate. They can drape themselves so that if you're relaxed and you're looking at someone with a diffuse gaze that's channeling, or even not, even if they're just sitting there, you can start to see sort of a play of features. It isn't a figment of your imagination. It's transfiguration. We talked about clairaudience, channeling, clairsentience, empathy. We talked about clairsentience and physical empathy, clairaugustance, which is clear tasting, clairalliance, clear smelling, claircognizance. That's just when we know. When we're in that state, there's kind of a continuum between mental mediumship and physical mediumship. That's when we can really have inspired writing or draw or create music. And then it goes to channeled writing, which is a little more intense. That's when less of us and more of them. And same with drawing. I have a friend who's a spirit artist, Karen Chris Sampson. She's a very gifted spirit artist, and she draws pictures of people in spirit. She's still in a mental mediumship state. Let's take it over to physical mediumship. And physical mediumship, again, is telekinetic. And an example of writing or art in the physical realm would be the card precipitation that we talked about, where pictures are formed by spirit on cards or silk. You know, the Bible talks about the hand writing on the wall. That would be an example of precipitation. Other things of physical mediumship would include materialization, and that's when spirit brings its form into our physical ability to see them. Ghosts do it. It can be facilitated through a medium. Obviously, through a medium, the spirits are going to be positive. Dematerialization can occur, and that's when a spirit has appeared and then they dematerialize. Another form of physical mediumship would be an apport, A-P-P-O-R-T, apportation of a person or object. That would be a physical object literally appearing in our view out of nowhere. A biblical example of that would be manna from heaven during the wandering in the wilderness that the Jewish people had to do back in the time of Moses. Ectoplasm and teleplasm, the names of the expression of spirit. They've actually done an analysis of ectoplasm, and it included skin cells and leukocytes. You can look it up, the physical composition of ectoplasm. If you do see a ghost or something like that, that's not mediumship. That's actually by the will of that particular spirit. But if you do feel or see maybe a relative that's passed or sense that kind of thing, that is definitely the beginning of mediumship. Ghosts, apparitions, or a unique occurrence would be called spontaneous clairvoyance because they're visible to everyone present. Other things that would be examples of the telekinetic or physical mediumship would be table tipping. And that's kind of between mental and physical, because table tipping is when a small table is taken, sort of like the Ouija board, I guess, which I don't advocate. The Ouija board, maybe you can relate to it as an example. People put their fingertips on top of this small table. There's several of them. And through the kinetic energy of the people, the table starts to shift and move. I've seen it demonstrated once. I'm not really good with that myself, but I have witnessed it, and it's pretty interesting. There is also something called direct voice in physical mediumship. Direct voice is when a spirit's voice is heard by everyone. It isn't just in the mind, the clairaudient mind of the medium. Music has been heard. There is a practice that used to be done in developing mediums and is still practiced in some circles of trumpet work. What that means is there's sort of a long, collapsible aluminum trumpet, very lightweight. And as the mediums go into deep trance, the trumpet can rise up off the table that it's sitting on, and the voice of spirit can speak through it. I have experienced that. Unfortunately, the room was pitch black, so I wasn't able to see it flying around the room, but it was quite startling to hear a voice projecting around the room. There's also the ability of spirit to touch us physically. And some of you may have had an experience where you feel like that was your grandmother brushing your hair or something. And for some people, they automatically get scared. They get superstitious or fearful of this. My premise is it's a really natural phenomenon. It is always startling, however, when spirit does decide to contact us. Promised you a story about a disappearing cat. I'm not sure that we're actually going to get to the exercises. I plan so many things for you that sometimes it just busts out just a cornucopia of things that I like to share with you. In our Tales from the Other Side, it is my honor to work with spirit. As you know, I'm a minister as well as a medium. Odd combination in some people's perspective, but pretty natural in mine, because I do not view my connection with spirit to be supernatural. It's just a natural connection. I went through a phase in my trance work. I haven't been doing it recently because my focus has shifted to a different aspect of physical mediumship, and that's manifestation, which is bringing into existence things, concepts into creation. And I'm developing my organization, which is the universal mind. So a lot of my energies have been going to that and to developing my business. I was sitting on a regular basis in 2009 and 2010 for physical mediumship. Basically, what that means is you just wait. You put yourself into that theta state that we mentioned earlier. Like I said, it's very helpful to have shamanic drumming or the Om or some kind of tone behind, but it's not necessary. I went into kind of a deep state, and I kind of slipped over that line where I didn't realize that I had lost my awareness. I went into a very deep state, and as I was coming out of it, of course, I didn't realize at first that I was coming out of anywhere. My nose and my eyes started to itch, and my forehead. I opened my eyes, and there was a cat in my bedroom where I was meditating, and it was sitting on the side table. It was a cat, like a huge gray cat moving around looking at me. I'm allergic to cats. I had already started to respond to its dander. My mind is racing, and I'm like, how did it get in here? How did it get in here? Wow, I think, did it come through the dog door? No, it couldn't have because of this, that, and the other. At the same time, I'm reaching for the light and trying to make sure the cat doesn't get frightened and saying, "It's okay, kitty, it's okay." And I turn on the light, and the cat takes a couple of steps toward me and jumps off the side table and dematerializes. I don't expect you to believe or not believe it, but I will tell you it was pretty unbelievable. It was absolutely amazing to have a physical cat appear out of nowhere. But that's how it is for physical mediums. I have been working on my card precipitation. You put it in a basket and, again, sit for physical mediumship. I was getting some little chicken scratches and stuff like that. It was a beginning, but like I said, I'm putting my focus on developing other aspects. And I don't know what I would do with it if I did develop my physical mediumship. I certainly wouldn't want to be a circus act or anything like that. Anyway, that's the tale of the disappearing cat from the other side. I've really enjoyed this show. I hope you do as well. I hope it gives you stuff to think about that you never would have thought about. I hope you hear things that sometimes open your mind to possibilities and at other times make you question things. and at other times that give you confirmation that some of the things that have happened to you are just not that strange. I give you my love. Next time we'll be talking about channeling from a medium's perspective, and I'll be sharing another tale from the other side and some other interesting things to help build your psychic abilities. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to the exercise today. This was, as you can guess, my favorite topic, mediumship. So thank you for joining us. You can find me on my website at mediumtracylockwood.com or friend me on Facebook at Psychic Medium Tracey Lockwood. I will look forward to seeing you next week for a view of life from a medium's perspective. I wanted to leave you with a little blessing. May today there be peace within. May you trust that you are exactly where you are meant to be. May you not forget the infinite possibilities that are born of faith in yourself and in others and in the source of our light and love. May you use the gifts that you have received and pass on the love that has been given to you. May you be content with yourself just the way you are. Happiness is there for each and every one of us. May you walk in peace. And remember, it's never inappropriate to be kind, and without integrity, we have nothing.